Okay, now for the introduction of the speakers. Their bios are long, so we've included most of that information, and it's worth looking at in the programs today. So I'll make only a brief introduction, and they'll come to the table as I do. Our panel members are experts in helping individuals take small steps that will have a big impact on our energy equation. First up is Bill Spratley, who's been at this a while, Executive Director of Green Energy Ohio. Bill? Next, John Cyriak, President of Go Sustainable Energy. Then Darren Hattinger, Chief Technical Officer of Tipping Point Renewable Energy, great name. And from one of our strong media sponsors, Dan Molchenko, General Manager of CBE and host of the Amazing Science Emporium. He will lead the discussion. On behalf of the Columbus Metro Club, our sponsors, Battelle, American Electric Power, Columbia Gas, our partner, OSU Office of Energy and Environment, please welcome our panel. Dan, it's all yours.
Thanks. Well, as you all know, this is part of the Fueling Ohio's Future series. And today, you may not gather from the title, Micro Solutions to Macro Energy Problems. What that boils down to is, we all know there's a big energy picture out there. The question is, what can we do about it? I mean, not the we, big picture we, but the you, the Jane Scott, you, as an individual. You know, what is it as individuals that we can do? Now, we create the problem individually, just sitting there, right now. You're exuding greenhouse gases. Every breath you let out, CO2 is getting out there, you're potentially warming the atmosphere. And my parents were very, very good about reminding me of that. In those tender, touching family moments, they never missed the opportunity to look at me and say, "What are you doing over there, breathing good people's air?" That was environmental consciousness at its finest. It's evolved since then, and we all have, I'm sure you know, in your workplaces, in your family, you've got that energy watcher. You've got the light monitor. You finished reading? Turn off the light. Now, usually that's an economic incentive. I take that a step worse. I'm a driver monitor. I'm that guy who drives an old 93 Corolla, stick shift, because I can eke out a few extra miles a gallon, coasting everywhere I can. I've got that attitude, and I admit, my training's in applied physics, but every time I put on the brake in my car, I berate myself because if you're putting on the brakes, you've wasted energy. I gave it too much gas. I should never have to brake. And I'm that guy, when you see people singing in the car, I am not singing for my enjoyment. I'm singing because I'm timing traffic lights and coast zones, because in my car, if it idles for 10 seconds, more than 10 seconds, I save money by turning the engine off. So I'm in there just bouncing around. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I have a little more? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can turn the engine off. That's me. So my first question to the panel, am I crazy? Okay, let's take that out of the broad sense. We got that answer. Trying to eke out just that little extra, maybe 2, 3 extra miles a gallon, just by changing a driving habit. Is it really worth it in the big picture? So Darren, let's start with you.
Well, I think all of it makes a difference. I look at it a little bit differently. I cycle a lot, so I choose that as a form of transportation. Someone asked me a key question one time. They said, "When's the last time you've been more than 5 miles away from your car keys?" I had to sit there a second. But you know what? I can answer that pretty readily. I can say, maybe 2 days ago. Just kind of showed or illustrated to me our dependence on our cars, and we can't be without them. You have to use the right tool for the right job. But you can make small steps. Maybe, most trips taken to your workplace or around your home are between 2 and 5 miles. So if we were to take maybe a few of those trips and do them on our bike, walking, bus, something like that, not only, be a little more fit for it, two, you lower your impact, you'd probably be a little bit happier, and 3, you save some money too, so I think a fair amount.
The money question. Well, John, what about you? Is it worthwhile to do those little things?
Yeah, I would say it does. It is, and I personally do a lot of those little things. You could imagine, because I'm a green business owner, but listening to how you described what you're doing, what I would say is competition motivates. You know, whether you're competing with yourself, how efficient can I be, or if you're competing with someone else and getting that information, how am I doing compared to someone else? How good can I get? That's a strong incentive. And to bring in the biking, for example, right now, Consider Biking's promoting the Ohio Bicycle Challenge. I don't know, by show of hands, who's signed up for that already. Okay, my staff has. I've made that. AEP, right now, if you go on the leader, AEP's winning. And those things, it starts to get you to evaluate, well, where else can I improve? What else can I do? And small things add up, you know, from a large group of people. So I think it matters.
Is there a tipping point? Like, right now, I know just looking on, when I come into work on 670, for example, one of my friends is a regional ODOT director, and he said that a lot of ODOT people call 670 the Autobahn. So I know there's not exactly a lot of people paying attention to the speed limits, and for every mile an hour you go over 60, you lose 3% of your miles per gallon. But am I making a difference? Are the one or two other people trying to follow that speed limit? Is it really a difference, or should we just give up because that macro picture is so big that what we're doing really doesn't, so I can get to work on time now and not worry?
Well, I think if you look at it, I think it's between 3 states, Ohio, Illinois, maybe Texas. I'd have to go back and look at it, but they looked at it. It was a combined 30 million cars on the road between those states. If you look at the consumption of our fuel, I guess it's hard to think about it when you turn on your car, but if you really start to think about your fuel use, not only is it economics, you have to look at things like national security. And for me, at least personally speaking, you know, we really take that to heart because, you know, I personally feel, and as a company we feel, fuel is the reason why we're in a lot of the places in the world we are today, putting our soldiers in harm's way. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's hard to think about that when you're just going about your daily routine. But if you stop and think for a second, you know what, if this would contribute to someone staying home or not getting shot up or, you know, disrupting a mission, you know, maybe you look at it a little bit differently.
Well, that brings us to another point, and that is, what is the core motivator? You know, it's, 60 to 100 people sitting here eating right now, everyone with a unique personality, unique lifestyle. What are the big motivators that we should be looking at to help change how we're consuming energy as individuals? And Bill, let me start with you.
Well, I guess I'm at the high end of the food chain with solar energy. Following up on what you just said, no war's ever been fought over solar power. Our fuel source comes up every day in the east, and we see more and more people all over this city and all over the state of Ohio employing solar and wind and biomass and energy efficiency. I think that the issue of the car is interesting, and my wife and I have identical Mercury Mariner hybrids, which are escapes, and she's a better coaster than I am. She can get up to 35 miles a gallon, and I have to really work at it. But we gave everybody this issue. This is a picture of a all-electric car, and if you read through here, if you went to the Columbus Auto Show, every major automaker has their primo car is the all-electric. And it's kind of like sticker shock in reverse. It says 92 miles per gallon equivalent. And so if we could transfer our transportation off of gasoline onto electric vehicles that are just coming into the market, we could start to cut the cord to the Middle East, where every 50 convoys we lose a soldier because they're transporting fossil fuel, and solar's being used, and wind in the military. If you've ever heard of the Green Navy, and you know, the military is really way ahead of society in general. So we're going to go 530 miles, like driving to New York City. We're going to start here at the Electrical Trade Center, go down to Cincinnati, up to Toledo. At the University of Toledo, they have 8 football fields worth of solar. There are solar companies there that came out of that university. We're going to go to Warren and then end at Progressive Field in downtown Cleveland, where we put up solar 5 years ago, and they just put up a wind turbine there on the stadium. So to me, there are people who are like Greg Kuss, the picture on the front there, buying a Volt. And, you know, while national security is a big factor, the thing we need in this state are jobs. And we have been able to create green jobs. They've estimated 128,000 or 2.5% of our whole employment workforce, and that's probably conservative. But, you know, I think that in the future, I'm very optimistic because I think the electric car, if you could, what we're going to show is that you can charge it with solar or wind. Most cars will be charged in your garage using coal power, and it's still cleaner using coal power in the middle of the night when the utilities can't give the power away. So it's a win-win for the utilities, electrifying the grid, bringing the smart grid in. I think our children are going to have a totally different view of energy. So it's critical that we take times like this to talk about energy literacy and understanding how we use energy. And the car is, you know, we make cars here, but we also make solar panels. We're one of the top states in that, and we're number 2 in parts for wind turbines. So, you know, we have, and I don't think we're going to get rolled over this time. You hear a lot about shale gas and so forth, but I really think we can have both. And I've been out on a big rig. I think it's a huge game changer, what's happening on the gas side. But I think in the future, you're going to see clean energy for all the reasons I just stated.
Well, let's explore that a little bit. That's, you know, obviously if we're going to have green jobs, we've got to have the market for it, and that starts at home. Does it start literally? Is solar at a point where we can all put them on top of our condos, our homes, our rooftops?
Yeah, I would say right now it is. A lot of people, you know, at a base level don't understand, like if you choose solar or wind or something, how that ties in with the grid. A lot of people still have the conception, I need a bunch of batteries in my house and this, that, and the other. So it's really, it's an education thing and really explain to people the economics support it now. It's not something that's gonna, you know, knock you out of your chair, but it's, you know, from a return perspective, if we were to look at from an economics level, you know, residential, maybe you're at about a, you know, simple payback of about 5, 6, 7 years. Commercial, you could be 3 to 6 years and maybe about a 12 to 15% return, which is better than the stock market any day of the week. So, yeah, it is viable here. And as long as the policy remains in place with House Bill 221, et cetera, I think that'll remain to be seen, or, you know, that'll still happen. It's very important for us, obviously, work with a company where, you know, one of our core focuses is solar energy, but we also deal with energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. For me, and what Bill was talking about a minute ago, there was a national security component of it, but it's really full circle, because now we're able to, you're speaking about green jobs. Well, we're taking veterans that are returning recently and some older, and we're putting them back to work on our jobs. I mean, all of our solar jobs, you know, it's all veteran labor. I mean, I'm pretty, I'm happy about that, because my dad really inspired me to do that. And so, I don't know, I think it's important that we could keep doing that and, you know, provide opportunity for people coming back home. And this is the fastest growing sector in the nation. You know, solar has more jobs right now than the steel industry. So it's not going away. We just need to keep the framework in place. We need to educate people. And, you know, solar is, Vice Admiral McGinn spoke here, it's been some time ago, about national security, et cetera, but I like to plagiarize a line from him. He said, there's not a silver bullet, but there's a lot of silver buckshot. And that was perfectly put, and I'll never forget that. It's not just solar, it's not just wind, it's energy efficiency, it's gas. I mean, there's all parts, there's traditional fuels, you know, as we start to transition. We just need to start looking at holistically and see how we get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, you've been kind of quiet on that. Yeah, let me go on the wind side. You know, we've talked about solar and its viability, you know, and quick payback time. I'm actually surprised it's that quick. What about wind? Is that a viable option, you know, residentially, or does that have to be something that's a wind farm that we all share collectively?
You know, there's a lot of different solutions, and this is where you get into needing technical expertise to understand where do you want a large utility scale wind turbine, and where might you want a smaller wind turbine. And same with solar. There's times when we're going to want and we need to have an existing, you know, rooftop solar industry, but also maybe centralized solar plants. But yeah, I see opportunity for small to large wind turbines. I don't know that you'll see a wind turbine in every backyard, but but we're gonna need it, and you can have it. I was up in Chicago this weekend. My sister was getting her PhD, and driving on the way back, if anyone's taken 65 from Chicago to Indy, there's this massive wind farm, and it was the best time. We pulled off the road. We took my son out, and if anyone has a small toddler, they love things that spin. It's like it is a 3-year-old's dream, and we just spent a half an hour running up and down the road. Each wind turbine had a name for someone in the family. Mama wind turbine, my son. Mine was like way off in the distance. But yeah, there's going to be times where you see, whether for geographic reasons or other, you can't mount a utility scale wind turbine, but you want the energy density of a wind turbine footprint. That's one thing even small wind brings you, is a lot of energy density. And so you might see that in some areas.
I'd just like to say about wind in Ohio, we're kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of wind. We get no respect. We have a meteorologist that works for us, and we're 12 years old as a nonprofit. We've actually done 25 wind tests across the state. We've done 3 Honda plants. We've done other factories, schools, zoos, to show that we have enough wind. But the reality is, my friends, that last year in 2011, the largest private investment in the state of Ohio was the $600 million Blue Creek Wind Farm right on Route 30 as you come out of Fort Wayne into Van Wert, and sitting next to it was a $175 million investment, the 6th largest. In between were some auto plants that are coming back to life. And so at this hour, the largest investments in this state have come from wind, and there are more in the pipeline. And a lot of this message hasn't got down to Columbus. You don't need to go around Purdue to see the wind turbines. Just go up to Route 30. There are 200 of them in the ground. They're 400 feet high, and we make the parts here. We're the #2 state in the country in the production of parts that go into wind turbines. So, we invented it. In 1890, Charles Brush had a wind turbine on his front yard in Euclid Avenue. It was on the front page of Scientific American. It lasted until the 1920s when some councilman, and you can picture this, I can at least, up in Cleveland, said, oh, well, let's keep it here, and Henry Ford wanted to take it to Dearborn Village. The reality is that the modern electric wind turbine was invented in Cleveland, Ohio. And so what we're trying to do now is to get that technology back. I just read that General Electric, for the first time now, has put more turbines in the ground than the foreign wind makers, who we gave the industry away to. So again, I'm optimistic because we have a great story. We just need to get it out. And unfortunately, a lot of it's become a political football. This isn't a partisan issue. The bill that created the requirement that our utilities have at least 12.5% renewable energy by 2025 had only one vote against it. It was completely bipartisan. That year, we gave an award to Governor Strickland. We also gave it to Speaker Husted. This is about jobs in Ohio, and that's the point that we just have to bring home all the time. These other technologies are fine, but this is a mature, this is a commercial industry that is putting people to work all across this state. And, I think that we need to get that message across, and it's difficult as a small nonprofit to get it out there. We don't have the ad ability of the oil industry or the gas industry to do that. But the exciting thing is it's a grassroots movement. And I invite you to go not only on our electric vehicle Tour de Sol around Ohio in the first week in June, but the first week in October. We have the largest solar tour in the United States the last 2 years. We've reached 50 counties, 261 sites. On that tour, the last 3 years, we have had 60 small-scale wind turbines. So you can go out and kick the tires. Find out, we had 60 businesses. Did you know that Fort Iron Works has got a large solar array on its roof over in Grandview? Did you know that IGS Energy over in Dublin has the largest solar array in Columbus? And did you know that our zoo is going to build one of the largest solar arrays in the state? They're trying to keep up with the Cincinnati Zoo. The Cincinnati Zoo has more solar at this hour than all the zoos in the United States put together. So we have a wonderful story all across Ohio, and I have to say, every day I wake up, there's another business or home or school that's putting up. The city of Powell is putting solar on its municipal building at this hour. So the price has come down, the price is right, It's a clean form of energy, and we're doing it for our children and our grandchildren. And I think that, you know, I can't be more optimistic, and I just get frustrated when I see, you know, attacks on failing businesses. There have been 14 mergers and acquisitions in the solar industry last year. And Solyndra failed because the Chinese came in and dumped their product. That's why our solar companies have had a hard time. And we need to keep those 4 plants up in Toledo. In the first quarter of this year, Ohio produced more solar panels than any state in the country other than Oregon. And, you know, those are real jobs. We have that technology. Those patents came out of the University of Toledo. And, you know, if we're gonna stay competitive in the future with the Chinese and with the Indians, who have many more people, are turning out many more engineers, we've got to be at the cutting edge. Ohio State University, our big universities, and our research centers have got to keep our young people at the cutting edge of this, because we're going to be outnumbered. The Chinese are advancing beyond us. They have gone past us not only in solar and wind. They're building 25 nuclear plants. They're building a coal plant every other week. We as Americans have got to, for the sake of our country and our security, keep this in the forefront. And we are the 18th largest economy for energy in the world, the state of Ohio. Now think about that. The Greeks, who we hear all about, they have 11 million people, like the state of Ohio. We are the 18th largest. We are a big player. We need to demonstrate. We can't back away. We have to keep going forward. I didn't mean to give a speech.
No, it's okay. I sense a small bit of passion there. So you care about the topic, I guess. Huh? Well, but that begs the question. A few weeks ago, I was in Germany, and especially out in the suburbs and then in the rural areas, anecdotally, just counting as I was driving, I would say about 50% of the homes had solar panels. And then every 2 or 3 miles, there'd be a cluster of 2 or 3 wind turbines out in the country. And then some of the farmers would dedicate 1 acre, 2 acres to solar arrays. And there was so much of that kind of adoption of new tech, renewable tech, that my daughter looked at me as we were heading to the airport to come back, and she said, "Dad, I feel like we're going home to a third world country." That to me was very telling. What is the difference? Why has Germany adopted that attitude so much more than we see here? I mean, you know, we just learned we've got a tremendous infrastructure, tremendous industry going here. Most of us don't know about it. How do we make that difference? How do we get the rest of Ohio turned on to this? Where are we failing that Germany succeeded?
Well, really, they were able to get a cohesive policy together and get behind it and back it. I remember, well, I don't remember per se from personal experience, I wasn't around then, but if you were to look after, you know, World War II or during World War II and, or after, you know, any major event like that in this country, you know, the United States is great about being able to coalesce behind something, or they used to be. Mm-hmm. Now we're so divided and everything's become a political football, to quote Bill. It's really hard to get policy passed that helps us, you know, proliferate these technologies. They just got behind it one day and said, hey, we're gonna do something about it. You know, they looked in the future, they looked at this as an intelligent energy solution. It's not, I loathe almost the word green, but it's an intelligent solution. You know, we've got to start transitioning to get there. It's not going to happen overnight. But again, they were able to all get behind it enough. Interesting enough, you said that in Germany. We were talking beforehand. I was able to look on Google Earth at a house I stayed at in Germany in 1991. I looked down from the satellite, and I got to see solar all over it. And I was like, oh, that's great. But a lot of people, when we talk to people about solar, they say, well, you know, Ohio doesn't have enough sun. And I tell them, Germany has less solar resource than anywhere in the United States. And they're the world leaders still. But that's because they decide to get behind it.
Let me correct him. Germany has the sunlight of Anchorage, Alaska. And yet it has more solar than any country in the world. It has more wind turbines. They made a decision, and it gets into European politics with Chernobyl and Green parties. And it was a conservative party that actually set up the feed-in tariff. And they're doing it for different reasons. And they are a big competitor of ours. And we have helped create the new modern Germany. But on the other hand, I think that, you know, we need to look at what we do best. We invented most of these technologies, and it isn't just wind and solar we've given away. You can list all the things that we now are buying back. But we need to integrate this. And I'm hopeful because one big difference between the European countries and this country is we have public utilities that are owned by investors. And I have to say, and I want to say this because I see Mark Gundelfinger sitting there from AEP, the solar guy. I've watched AEP develop. When I was Consumer Counsel, I used to fight all these utilities. I want to say that despite all you're reading in the paper, the AEP utility is the friendliest utility to solar right now in Ohio. You can get a grant as an individual or a business if you sell your solar renewable energy credits. They are part of the Turning Point project, which hopefully the PUCO will approve, that will create hundreds of jobs to support this plant up in Napoleon. And so the foresight of the utilities is going to be critical going forward. We can do this. We know how to do all of this. It's just a matter of political will.
Well, this brings us back to individuals, because on that subject of political will, and I don't remember which of the three, but I remember when we were emailing back and forth before the panel, one of you mentioned that our national leadership has basically tossed the torch on this. They're just not doing anything about it. And so it is up to us as individuals to carry things forward. So, John, you want to tackle that? Okay.
Yeah, the word I use is abdicated.
Okay.
You know, look, I actually think the state of Ohio's done a pretty decent job. A couple years ago when we passed Senate Bill 221, it was bipartisan. Everyone in the state house voted for it except one person, and it's worked. A lot of the national and state policies have brought down the cost of solar and wind. Efficiency, which is what we do, we're efficiency consultants. We found a big market with assistance from companies like Columbia Gas and AEP, where the economics are there, but the knowledge and information isn't. But you know, you asked about the drivers for change, whether it's national security or environmental security or economic security and jobs. And for me, I look at this and I see, you know, it's a buffet. You talk about these issues, whether we're competing with China or it's risk from, you know, what happens to nuclear plants in Japan and affects our auto industry, to national security, to climate change, which needs to get rebranded, I think. But look, these are all real concerns. You don't need to be concerned about all of them. If you're concerned about one, which I'm willing to bet every single person in this room is concerned about one, then we should find the solutions, and the political will are there because they have a common set of solutions. But at the national level, and I hope some representatives tune into PBS on Sunday to watch this, but look, there hasn't been action. We haven't had a comprehensive energy policy in decades, and there's no reason why not to. It's complicated, but it should be there.
So what can we do on that particular front? Do we just write letters to our congresspeople, or you know, what action do we take?
I think it's yes, we have to pressure our congresspeople. We like to complain about how bad they are, but we elect them in. You know, and right now, instead of talking about more bipartisanship and acknowledge when someone else has accepted your point, we have, you know, just this week in Indiana, someone's won a primary promising on being more partisan, you know, against bipartisanship. This isn't a recipe for putting together an energy plan where everybody can work. So it is writing to your congresspeople. It's taking personal action. It's talking in your place of work what you can do. You know, AEP, for example, they have their Grid Smart program, and I get a mailing from that says, hey, sign up for the Grid Smart, for the smart metering. We're going to do it, but what you find is even in the community that supports these technologies, renewable energy technologies, you find people against programs like that. And I think this is where small actions come into place. You sign up for these programs. You go talk with Columbia Gas and AEP about their energy efficiency programs, both for your home and your business, and you start taking action. And the change is going to come from the bottom up. Hopefully national leaders follow.
Okay. Now we've only got a few minutes before we're going to open up to Q&As anyway. So I want to get something really practical while we've got the time. So think about this. What is, pick one thing, maybe two if they're related, but one or two things that each of us can do when we leave here that can have either a great or a small impact, but one way or the other is going to make some kind of a difference, micro or macro. So get out notebooks, because I want this to be something that people really can use as a checklist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Tom.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, well, I have to pick the biggest impact on energy that you can do for the least cost, and it's the most fun, and I'll tell you why, is set back your temperature at night. Home, business, whatever. Set back the temperature at night.
In the winter, you mean?
In the winter.
Okay.
Save a ton of energy, and you might think it's uncomfortable, but look, if you're married, there's nothing that helps your marriage better than turning back the temperature at night. Because you're not hot-headed, and boy, are you snuggling in under those blankets. So
This is going to be on PBS, not HBO. So.
So that'd be my one.
Actually, to speak to John's, I think the numbers roughly equate to, for every degree in temperature you lower, it's roughly 3% savings. So if you were to lower it 2-3 degrees or 3 or 4 degrees, you could be at about 10% savings. So if you look at it from an economic impact.
Why not 22 degrees?
Yeah, right. I keep it cool in my house. But you know, things at home, you know, your water heater settings, you know, turn it down to 120. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, whether it's you know, Energy Star, there's government APS and things, there's various utility information out there. You could look at, again, human behavior is what guides most of this, and getting people to care and recognize and identify that there's an issue, or that it's even an issue. We deal with it on a business level every day too. So getting people to look at energy as an expense, and getting to look at that way. I'll give you an example. Especially you work in the food industry maybe, or something like that, profit margins are pretty small. You know, if you're running on 5% margin and you know, $3,000, that's $150. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure most commercial businesses, we could find $150 worth of utility savings. I mean, if you have to start to think about all the people you have to put in to support all those sales to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to capture and define what the issue is. You have to give visibility to it, and there are cost-effective ways to do that now. We can tell you what's on every circuit in your panel in real time, down to the second. You can pull it up on your iPhone and control it. AP offers a nice rebate to it too. So being able to define, it's kind of like Six Sigma, if anyone's familiar with that.
Yeah.
You know, just being able to, you know, define it, analyze it, improve it, and control it. And that's the biggest problem we've had is most people, how many people here know how much they pay on their utility bill? But probably not that many. You just pay it. You just send it out.
Yeah, I watch it.
Yeah, so most people, you look at it and you just send the bill out. They don't have visibility into what's driving the costs in their house, mm-hmm. or in their place of business. So getting into that, and I admit, even though I work with it, those bills can seem like voodoo. When you're trying to see what you're actually paying, and with customer charges, demand charges, and everything else. But I guess getting really people to focus on what they're spending and seeing it as a true cost is one of the biggest steps.
Okay, so we have Snuggle and thermostat.
I like his.
We have,
better.
look at your spreadsheet, your checkbook at home.
Yeah.
And then, Bill?
I see all these younger faces out here. I just turned 65, so I have, Faye and I have 5 granddaughters, and every time I talk to them, there's got some gizmo in their hand. In the back of this magazine is a list of 112 businesses that are our business members. A lot of them are solar installers. You can also see it at greenenergyohio.org. But the website I want to give you is Energize Ohio. We put it together with Ohio State Extension, and it is a guide to all the incentives, all of the public ones and private ones. And I would definitely look at the utility incentives. They've had some fantastic ones, and have had a hard time getting those out to people. I just want to say, we had our 12th annual meeting over the weekend in Dayton, or Miamisburg, and there was a consultant there. We had 7 green businesses, and this consultant's working with the former chief officer of Dayton Power and Light. It's an interesting idea. It's called Dropoly, and what they're creating for kids is a computer game on energy that they can play with their parents. And if you can imagine, I'm thinking of my granddaughters, you know, maybe that's what it's going to take for energy literacy, is we have to get this to the future. It's too late for us baby boomers. We're the ones who screwed up everything, including the environment and climate and so forth. But, you know, just think about it. If we could reach younger people, you know, growing up every day, a lot of them are now seeing solar and wind. I mean, I think most of you in the room have seen the Byers turbine, you know. The Byers family is giddy about that. They put a second one up. You know, if I'd have known, we generally don't advocate putting turbines up in urban areas because there's all kinds of restrictions. But, you know, you think about one business like that made a decision and the impact it has. So my challenge would be, you know, think about what you can do in your business or as an individual that will carry this forward into the future, because it really comes from the grassroots up.
I was going to say, add one thing to that. I'll tell you what, I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son. In other words, I'm not getting any sleep, but anyhow, John's in a similar boat. But I'll tell you, one of the proudest things is when we could go by job up by that wind turbine. We have a solar installation up at a bar up there, Flanagan's, and I could drive my daughter by there, and she could see that, and she points it out to all her school friends, and, you know, sees it at home. And, you know, I used to try to clean coal for close to a decade with AEP here, doing their SCR systems and scrubbers and things like that, and to be able to make that transition and explain it to her and about, you know, trying to work to get there. She's literate already at 6 years old about the environment and the policy. I mean, we walk down the street, you know, picking up the recyclables and things like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting to see. So, I mean, just as a personal driver, I think that's something we can encourage.
Excellent. Well, it's now 1 o'clock, so Darren, Bill, John, thank you very much. And we're ready to open it up to Q&A from the audience. So I think I've got the routine down right, where you come up to the microphone, ask the question, and for the next 15 minutes, our panel can answer them for you. So step on up. I didn't bring my cane and hat, so Oh, and obviously when you come up, state your name, where you're from, such as John McKnight of Rife's Auto Body.
So do I no longer need to state my name now?
Nah, go ahead. Make it formal.
So I'm John McKnight, and yeah, I do work in the automotive industry, and I'm very supportive of alternative energy sources and, you know, battery cars, all the different types of energies that are out there for the automotive industry. But there is some negativity in the industry from coworkers that I deal with towards specifically electric cars, talking about the disposal of the batteries, because at some point they are going to come to the end of their life, and also I don't know if you would call it the mining of the metals that the batteries require. Certain types of metals that the batteries require are only found in certain parts of the world, which, as I understand it, are not here in the United States. So there's quite a large, I'm told anyway, carbon footprint in transporting those metals to the United States, you know, for the electric cars. And between that and the disposal of the batteries and the problems that go along with that, there's quite a few people I know that are very against electric cars. And so I'm not sure who to direct that to, but give me some fuel for my side of the argument when I'm talking to them. What's the truth about that? And if what they say is true, then what's the solution to it? Or you know, how do I battle that?
I'd say it's not.
Thank you.
It's not perfect right now with the batteries in the cars, and I know Toyota, they own their own mine basically for the metals for batteries. One of the only automaker that I know of that does. Certainly, precious metals are a whole nother topic, and what goes into these. There's new battery technologies. If recent study came out, pretty reputable. If to answer that question, though, the carbon footprint from an electric car still trounces that of any internal combustion vehicle. I mean, I can't exactly cite the numbers right off the top of my head, but it is still pretty comprehensively a slam dunk. Does it need to get better? Absolutely. I think you'll start to see, just like solar panels and various other things, more recycling options. I know companies are taking them for forklifts, things like that when they're done. So they'll find ways to rework those batteries. So I think as you see any emerging technology, or kind of like an iPod, you see all these companies selling accessories for them, you know. It's finally when the market's created for it, you'll start to find the solutions for it.
Bill? Yeah.
I want to give you a Columbus-centric response here. On Kinnear Road is a research center at Ohio State called CAR, the Center of Automotive Research. The kids are pretty excited. They sent a postcard with their picture with President Obama when he was here, toured that. It's world class. It is something that doesn't exist many places. It has brought together the big automakers and the big utilities to talk about how do we move the electric vehicle industry forward. You all know about the Coda plant that isn't going to get here, And these are legitimate concerns, I think, that are being raised. You know, you wonder about Henry Ford and the first car and bringing an automobile when everybody else is driving a horse. There's going to be some bumps on the road. I think, though, that when we begin to realize, and it is the silver buckshot, maybe there are, you know, diesel, other types of automobiles, but we have grown more and more dependent. I got to meet Jimmy Carter in the White House when I was consumer counsel, and at that time we were like 40% dependent on oil. Now it's 60%. I mean, we as a country have got to use all means necessary to make ourselves more independent so that we are not fighting wars over oil. And one of the ways to do that is to look at the infrastructure that we have. And I think the electric vehicle presents a lot of opportunity. And I think that the batteries, the solar industry is often criticized for the same thing. If you go up at the first solar plant, which 2 years ago was the largest solar company in the world, their plant at Toledo, they actually track where all their solar arrays go because they have cadmium telluride in them. They have as much cadmium in one solar panel as a flashlight battery that many people just throw in the trash. And so they have to try to recover that. And so, you know, the whole idea of cradle to cradle, and we need to figure out how do we make an industry out of recovering these kinds of waste. And we also have in Columbus, Waco, which is another very unique entity that I think could come to play. So I think a lot of these solutions to that question are going to happen right here at Ohio State University and right here in Columbus. And, you know, these are the jobs of the future that we need the brightest, the best and the brightest to think about. And we need to keep them here in Ohio.
And John, one other thing I wanted, John, McKnight, yeah, is to make sure, and I have to do this at the station all the time, we were talking about science literacy, is make sure they're thinking critically and comparing apples to apples. Like, you know, John had mentioned the transportation cost of getting the stuff over here, but as the Japanese tsunami showed, even with internal combustion engines, there are a lot of components that are being transported from Asia over here. So that's a net zero sum, you know, comparing. Sorry, now John, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, right now our transportation is dominated by automobiles and other vehicles that run on gasoline. We're not very diversified in our fuel source for transportation at all, and that's an extraordinarily big liability for anyone in national security or anyone who runs a business and understands you need diversity to dodge liability. But batteries, you know, use electricity, and electricity can be generated from a number of sources: solar, wind, hydro, nuclear, coal, gas, oil even. It gives us a lot of diversity, and batteries, the development of batteries for cars is going to let us diversify our energy sources for transportation. It's also going to allow us to use different forms of generation more on the grid. We're going to need lots of energy storage, including batteries, if solar and wind are continue their trajectory and get larger. It kills two birds with one stone, and we absolutely need to have forms of energy storage like batteries. So it definitely trounces your standard automobile.
Until Doc Brown comes up with the Mr. Fusion reactor. Yeah. Go ahead, next.
Hi, I'm Ken Thompson. I'm an architect, and I'm all for what what we're doing. But I'm a bird watcher, and I'm a little concerned about the wind turbines, and I hear conflicting information. I was wondering if you can update me on, you know, what are the facts about birds and wind turbines?
More birds die from hitting your windows than die from wind turbines.
Well, I would say that, you know, Altamont Pass, if you've ever driven out of San Francisco, out of the Bay Area up to Sacramento, you go through the first big wind farm ever built in the U.S., and they're changing it out now because it was a bird Cuisinart. What was happening is a raptor it was like a oil derrick. It had a lattice tower. A raptor would perch on it and see a rabbit and then fly through the blades. And so, you know, the wind industry doesn't even talk about what happened there. But on the other hand, California almost single-handedly commercialized wind. So what we see in Ohio, for example, the controversial wind farm that when it does get built will be very close to us at Urbana, 40 miles away. It was approved 4-3 in the Supreme Court, a lot of opposition, not so much on the bird issue. It's going to have a very unique agreement. It's going to protect or have a certain take for the Indiana brown bat, which is a endangered species. When you meet with wind developers, and we had 3 of them with us Saturday, they are very careful as to the habitat, as to the archaeological issues, setbacks. There are a whole lot of restrictions on how they put a wind farm in. And when you have these modern pylon towers, the birds see those. The problem here in this part of the world has been the bat, and they haven't still figured out exactly why bats run into wind blades. But you know, it's an issue, and you're right. Cats kill many, many more times. If you go up to the top of the Rife Tower and look at the ledge, you'll see it just filled with birds. And in fact, in some cities, they actually shut the lights off in migratory seasons. So this is a legitimate issue. But the reality is they found a bald eagle that had died of mercury poisoning in Indiana. And so far, a wind turbine has not killed a protected national bird. And we have 500 eagle's nests in this state. So it is, you know, the industry, I think, is very sensitive to it. And there are wind farms that will not be built in Ohio. We have a wind map of Ohio. You can see a link of it off our website. Most of it's to the northwest of us. Generally, you cannot put wind turbines in valleys. We're sitting in the Scioto Valley. The best place to put a turbine here would be high on the valley ridges, and birds tend to fly along the river. And then we're the guys that put the stake in the lake. Back in '04, we did what is still the highest wind elevation wind test in any of the Great Lakes. It's 3.5 miles off Cleveland. And you know, the reason the Europeans have gone into water, if you've traveled in Europe, you'll see wind turbines in the North Sea and throughout Europe, is they run out of land. It's a lot cheaper to put a wind turbine in a cornfield. And so there is a lot of avian work. I can't say enough about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife people. They are just excellent. And so, you know, it is not a perfect technology, but I think bird watchers should be more afraid of other things than wind turbines.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Joe. I'm with Ohio State. And keeping with the wind theme, turbine theme, another issue aside from wildlife is aesthetic issues with wind turbines. And so when I go down to my grandmother's property in Hocking County, you'll look out at night and see the ridge tops, and you'll see the satellites with or the towers with the red lights flashing. I'm sort of wondering, if we already have those in place, what is the issue of putting wind turbines with those? Has that ever been brought up? And you mentioned the shale gas with those oil you know, the big rigs there. Have there been thoughts, or what prevents there from being wind turbines with those?
It's kind of funny, actually, when we were putting up our solar installation off 270 and Sawmill, I was speaking with someone about the wind turbine up at Byers up there, and someone mentioned how ugly it was, and I said, do you happen to notice the 3 cell phone towers that are between you and that wind turbine? People see what they want to see, and a lot of people, especially with wind, I find, if they're not making money off it, they're not as happy about it. So if they're on a farm where everyone's equally involved in the financial returns, people tend to have a little less objection. And I think, you know, solar kind of gets some of the same exposure, but it's usually a little more integrated into the building structure. Wind, I just tend to find it polarizes people, you know, much less, but it's in the eye of the beholder.
If I could just respond, you're probably never going to see a big wind turbine, I never say never, in the Hocking Hills. There's a professor down at OU that is doing some tests, as you're familiar with Ohio University and the river there, way up on a ridge, they're doing a wind test. We generally have been funded with federal money. We have not gone outside the wind zone into the Ohio Valley. It's actually where the Wisconsin Glacier ended. If you're familiar with the geology of Ohio, everything above that is windier. So, you know, I think there are a lot of similar issues to the big rigs and wind turbines. And then Dale Arnold at the Ohio Farm Bureau is on our board, the energy manager, and he talks to groups of landowners that want to do both and probably could do both. You know, the big rig that I was on, and Faye was with me back in November, is a spectacular technology when you go inside and see how they have developed this ability to do the hydro fracking horizontally. The only problem is, of course, you know, the water and how that gets disposed of, which is a huge issue. When a wind turbine burns up, they put it on the internet, but it doesn't do anything to the water or the air. And so, you know, I think that we can coexist. I do think that, you know, as these two technologies go forward, we have a very bright energy future. We just have to think about how do we do this wisely. And I have to agree with the questioner that I personally don't think you can put a wind turbine everywhere. I think solar is a lot more ubiquitous, and and can probably be put most places. There are a number of siting issues, and we have a whole process that takes that into account. It's worked successfully, and that's why, and we've also created a tax-friendly environment for the wind developers, much more friendly than Indiana. Everybody talks about being over near Purdue, but the reality is we're going to see a lot more investments of hundreds of millions of dollars in the wind zone. And, you know, again, I think that the public has a right to speak out, and if they don't want it in their backyard, then there's a process to determine that.
Real quickly, I would just say, if aesthetics come up, I would recommend anyone who's concerned about the aesthetics drive up to Chicago, go right through that wind farm, and right after that, you drive through Gary, Indiana. And then, you know, pick, right? When it comes down to which would you rather live by, and I think we'll have an answer.
Yeah.
Best point ever.
Yeah.
Jane, we have a few seconds left.
Okay, life is about trade-offs, right? I actually have kind of a two-part question that has the same dynamics, I guess. You've already brought up Germany. My in-laws are from Germany. I am always amazed that they are so much farther ahead of us in terms of things like recycling and so forth, in terms of the systematic processes. What does it take for us to learn from other countries in terms of conservation and things like that? And along with that, almost every single speaker we've had through this series has said our largest single source of energy is conservation. How as a society do we incentivize real conservation? We've taught ourselves for the most part not to smoke. We've taught ourselves for the most part not to litter, but we haven't taught ourselves to conserve energy.
It's a great point, and I think a quick answer is we haven't been in a position where we've lost everything twice. You know, it really, I mean, we've been spoiled by cheap electricity, spoiled by a lot of things, and we have never been put in that position, and hopefully never will be. So the attitude from the beginning is absolutely different. They have different motivation, I suppose, or maybe increased motivation. To your second point, you know, it's like when we put up a solar installation, one of our customers put it up and said, you know, Dave, I'm real happy you're putting up solar, but it's like your lighting sucks and so is your HVAC. I mean, the best dollar you save is the one you don't spend. And more than economics, it's what you don't use. And it's not tangible for most people. People don't see electrons flying around, but, you know, turning off your light or turning down temperature, things like that, that's a little more tangible. Solar, wind, those things are tangible because you kind of put your hands on them. But it's controlling that human behavior and I guess recognizing it and becoming educated about it.
Yeah, there's a long, complicated answer that I think I could give, but to keep it short, you know, my company provides energy efficiency consulting. We talk about conservation. It's all I think about when I'm eating, when I'm running in the shower, you know, when my wife's talking to me and yells at me to pay attention. You know, over 10 years, it's all I've been doing, and it's a challenge. So let me tell you what I learned yesterday, and then maybe this will help answer some of the question. Did you know that if you mount pressure transducers at the end of the line of your pumping system, instead of at the front of the line to control your VFD, you'll save 5 to 20% more just by mounting the pressure sensors in a different spot. I didn't even really know that, okay? So one of my engineers brought that up, and now we all know. So why is it hard to conserve? Because there's technical issues like that. Who here knew to mount pressure sensors in a different spot, right? It's complicated technical issues. There's financing issues, there's culture, there's attitudes. It's a lot. So I think there's a number of things that prevent that conservation attitude and ethic and from it happening, and we need to push on all those fronts.
Thank you all. Before we leave, I want to remind you of next week's forum. Please sign up early. Abigail Wexner, Steve Allen, Jane Hayes, talking about the nationwide children's hospital expansion. Also want to invite you for continue this conversation out in the lobby with coffee and cookies. And most of all, let's thank Bill Spratley, John Syriac, Darren Hadlinger, and Dan Molchanko for your work today. And a lot of fun, a lot of humor, and a lot of good ideas. Thanks to all of you. Thanks also to Battelle AEP, Columbia Gas, and the OSU Office of Energy and Environment. Dan?
Their bio info is in your handouts, and just surf to their websites, because there's a lot of incredibly cool, for me, geek stuff, but for very non-geek stuff too. And one more round of applause for them. Let's show them we had the better place.
Thank you all.